Hi, I'm Pastor Josiah Black from Peru First Baptist Church, and this is our ongoing Bible study of the book of Micah. We today are going to cover Micah chapter 7, verses 1 through 6. And as Micah 7 is the last chapter in Micah, I'm guessing we'll only have about 2 weeks left in this study, at least the study of Micah. So for those of you who have been following this and who want to continue to do a Bible study in this format, I am going to keep making these videos after we finish Micah. I'm going to take a couple weeks off, and then I'll be back with a new book that we'll be looking at and working with. But the point of taking the couple weeks is I'm really hoping to step up the information I'm able to give you about the books. I'm hoping to add some graphics and visuals that'll help you understand the parts of the Bible and the parts of history that we're studying when we read some of these things. So look for the return of this a couple weeks after we finish Micah, with what I hope will be an even better experience and a more educational experience for anybody who watches. So thanks so much for being here and for following along with the study. I'm excited to do it. So let's get into Micah 7. Opens on a real thrilling note. I'm just kidding, it's a lament. The first 6 verses are a lament. Let's read that now. How miserable I am. I feel like the fruit picker after the harvest who can find nothing to eat. Not a cluster of grapes or a single early fig can be found to satisfy my hunger. The godly people have all disappeared. Not one honest person is left on the earth. They are all murderers, setting traps even for their own brothers. Both their hands are equally skilled at doing evil. Officials and judges alike demand bribes. The people with influence get what they want, and together they scheme to twist justice. Even the best of them is like a briar. The most honest is as dangerous as a hedge of thorns. But your judgment day is coming swiftly now. Your time of punishment is here, a time of confusion. Don't trust anyone, not your best friend or even your wife. For the son despises his father, the daughter defies her mother, the daughter-in-law defies her mother-in-law. Your enemies are right in your own household. Okay, so obviously this is not a cheerful portion of Scripture. And again, we've talked about lament in this study before because that's woven into Micah quite a bit. But lament is, just an acknowledgement before God and before the audience of how bad things have gotten. So there's a degree to which in this time and in this culture, when you would lament, there's certain language you use around that, certain posture that you take on. And so the intensity of this language is not necessarily supposed to describe things this author's actually seeing happen around them in real time, but is supposed to capture the emotion and the overall sort of sinfulness and rebellion that's present in the culture. So this notion of verse 1, how miserable I am. I feel like the fruit picker after the harvest who can find nothing to eat. Not a cluster of grapes or a single early fig can be found to satisfy my hunger. So obviously this is a metaphor for how they're feeling and how they're experiencing this sensation of being in this culture as it sort of falls apart on a moral level. So there's not actually a problem with the harvest. This is just intended to evoke a particular emotion. Someone who's worked really hard, but now all the fruit is gone and there's nothing left to be found, and they are hungry. And this is really supposed to capture this, which the author goes on to talk about that. He sort of explains himself in verse 2. The godly people have all disappeared. Not one honest person is left on earth. They are all murderers, setting traps even for their own brothers. Now, so this is supposed to sort of explain the metaphor that he just used. The godly people have all disappeared. There's no fruit left. I'm not seeing that here. Not one honest person is left on earth. They are all murderers, setting traps even for their own brothers. So he's reflecting on the fact that the character he sees in the people around him is compromised. They are doing things for their own benefit. He's not literally saying that everyone in Judah is a murderer, but he is saying that essentially they have the character traits, they have the moral value of a murderer. So they're all off course, they're off track, they're deep into sin and rebellion. Both their hands are equally skilled at doing evil. Officials and judges alike demand bribes. The people with influence get what they want, and together they scheme to twist justice. That's verse 3. The intention here, and I have no doubt here the author is actually describing things that he's seeing. This one is not a metaphor. In all likelihood, he's seeing this corruption on a political level. But one of the big points of verse 3, and that I think this author would really want to drive home, is the idea that this is deliberate, it is premeditated, it is systemic. All of these things are true. So this is not just a few bad actors sort of poisoning the well. This is on a cultural level. These folks have fallen out of where God would want them, where they're supposed to be, the kind of behavior and character that God wants to see in his people. They're not seeing it. In fact, many people are doing it deliberately in the other direction. They are actively preying on, lost my word, they're actively preying on other people. And in many cases, the people being preyed upon are in turn preying on others. So this society is no longer one where people are being treated as image bearers of God and afforded the honor that they deserve as created beings before God. This is sort of an every person for themselves, and it is bad in Judah right now, on a political level and on a personal level. He goes on to say, even the best of them is like a briar. The most honest is as dangerous as a hedge of thorns. But your judgment day is coming swiftly now. Your time of punishment is here, a time of confusion. So this one's kind of part A and B. He finishes up this description of the people and the culture that he's seeing around them. Even the best of them is like a briar. The most honest is as dangerous as a hedge of thorns. So those of us who are from areas where we spend any time at all in the woods, you know what briars and thorns are. If you've spent any time out there at all, you've no doubt encountered these things, and it's no fun. We know how to deal with it. But this is a very particular image he's trying to evoke here. These people are prickly. Just making contact with them, you'll experience harm. They are, in a sense, out to get you. And it is hard to even move in these spaces without losing some blood because of how poisoned this culture has become. Again, by sin, by rebellion, by failing to hold up to their end of the covenant agreement that God laid out, which was, of course, if you'll recall, the subject of verse 6. So verses 1 through the first half of 4, we've got this, again, description of what this person is seeing in the culture around them. And it's stated very dramatically, but that's to drive home how serious it is. And also to make it clear that this person is not holding anything out back in what they're bringing to God. They're not sugarcoating it in a way that, it's bad, but, here are some bright spots. No, we're going to talk about the things that are wrong. We're going to say those. We're going to own those. We're going to be sad or angry about those things. And we're going to do all that before God. Lament is something that we, in modern context, struggle with. And I think I've talked about that before. But we really struggle to be honest about negative emotions in front of other people and in front of God. Because somewhere along the way, this idea has infiltrated Christianity that we're supposed to be happy all the time, right? And even if those of us who know that isn't true, sometimes that's still our default. We kind of take a fake it till you make it mentality almost sometimes, or we bottle stuff up. But for biblical folks, especially the Old Testament, that was not the case. If you were sad, you tell God about it. If you're angry, even angry with God, you tell God about it. And a lot of that is recorded in the Psalms and in other places. And it's there, and it's raw, and it's real. And it, I think, is a great benefit to us because we should take a cue from that it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay even to be angry at God sometimes. He understands that. Doesn't mean we're righteous in our anger. Sometimes our anger with him is a human failing. We don't understand what we're seeing, and our response is that. It's a lack of understanding. But he's graceful and merciful with us, even when we find ourselves in those moments. And when God says he wants relationship with us, he knows what that entails. He knows what that encompasses. We are fragile and broken human beings, which means sometimes we're going to get mad at him because he's the one there to get mad at. The way a kid will get mad at a parent if something doesn't go their way, even if that parent has no control over it. That's his relationship with us. So he loves us and he understands that. And the Old Testament folks, they got this. They understood that God was fully theirs and that everything in the full spectrum of their feelings was fair game to share with him, even share publicly. So lament, I think, is important. And if we learn, we can learn a great many things from the practices of the Old Testament people. But I think that is one that is particularly useful for us these days. So anytime during any of our Bible studies, if I call out a lament, I just encourage you to pay attention to how these folks do it, the rawness and the realness that they're willing to share with God and with other people. And that might be something worth emulating in our own lives. Okay, mini sermon over. Let's go ahead and continue with Micah chapter 7. So the second half of verse 4 is a warning, essentially, a statement that's still part of lament. Your judgment day is coming swiftly now. Your time of punishment is here, a time of confusion. This is not a far future kind of prediction. This is not one of those coming swiftly, but swiftly in like God time, where it means like 1,000 years from now. Like these people are on the precipice of being conquered and carried away. And so this is real. It's coming. Don't trust anyone, not your best friend or even your wife. For the son despises his father, the daughter defies her mother, the daughter-in-law defies her mother-in-law. Your enemies are right in your own household. So this is talking really again about the moral depravity of this culture. So much so that even the family unit, which was an essential notion in this culture, even the family unit has been corrupted by it. The one group of people you should be able to trust and count on for love and protection above everyone else, even that place, you cannot trust them. You cannot look at them. You cannot believe that you're safe there because of how much this sinfulness and rebellion has penetrated the culture. So this is, it's harsh, and this would be a hard thing for these folks to hear about themselves, about their culture, about what's going on, and we can't shy away from that. Now, it's this is not intended to be any kind of a prophetic statement. In the New Testament, Jesus talks a little bit about how he's going to set fathers against sons and daughters against mothers and things. There's some echoing of this language, but it's actually in a completely different sense, a completely different context. This conflict is happening because there's moral rebellion and moral depravity, and people are so out to get one another that even families are turning in on themselves and devouring themselves. The conflict that Jesus talks about bringing is the conflict of people trying to live in the way that he's called them to follow after his kingdom, to accept his lordship, and to let that change their lives. He's talking about the inherent conflict that change is going to create between those individuals who are following after Jesus and the people around them, even family members. So it's, even though the language probably sounds familiar to us, it's from two different places. Jesus creates conflict because he's creating positive life change, and that stands out. And people don't understand it, and they want to push back against it. Here in Micah, he's describing the decay and the collapse of this family system because of rebellion and sin. So again, it might sound similar, but we're talking two different concepts. But I'm sure when Jesus was using that language, he knew these passages, obviously. He would have studied the book of Micah, and he would have used that language very deliberately because he knows that would evoke in his audience, oh, okay, I have a sense of this conflict coming, but he's talking about it again from a slightly different angle. It's going to happen for this reason, which is a good reason, but there will be conflict as a result of it. I hope that makes sense. So that's the first part of Micah chapter 7, verses 1 through 6. And again, I'll have a discussion question below the Facebook post, so I would encourage you to participate in that. Thank you so much for joining, and I will see you next week for our next video.